Hi there folks, and welcome to another web segment, this time on creating user-friendly RPL. My name is Mark Ratcliffe from Mr. Wed Training and Assessment. Today we're going to talk about learner-friendly RPL versus audit-friendly RPL, and believe it or not, we can get the two to mix. I'm going to do that by helping you to make the magic happen. 5 steps to ensure that your RPL assessment is robust and appropriate for your audience. The first thing is it must be a meaningful process. The candidates have to see the big picture. What are those benchmark standards and what do they have to do to prove those standards? We want to set them up for success by making it as autonomous as possible, giving them an opportunity to identify what's the best evidence for them to collect and how to collect that evidence before they submit it. I do think there's an opportunity to show growth through this process. Help the candidates to see their professional journey over time, to see where they've come from and where they need to go. We have to identify those high value targets as well. What evidence is going to have the greatest impact to their RPL process and in supporting their claim for competence? And then finally, creating those great connections between you and the candidate to support them through the RPL. So magic happens in RPL when it's meaningful. We have to help the candidate to identify the indicative evidence to support their claim for competence. In fact, if we make it as autonomous as we can with that very clear guidance, they're going to have the best chance of success in putting together a good RPL submission. Let's look at it as an opportunity for growth, wherever they come from and where they're going to, and what can they use from their personal and professional experience. What has the most impact evidence-wise? Those high value targets, the evidence of the most value. If we can help them by understanding those things, again, we're going to give them the best chance of success. And in the end, it's about making great connections between you and them as the candidate, but more importantly, helping them to make connections between the relevant standard and the evidence that they might have. So how do we make RPL learner-friendly? Well, you can start by providing a variety of acceptable or indicative evidence. This will help the candidates to produce a credible submission. Use industry-specific evidence where you can, and in this way you're speaking their language, talking to the kinds of documents that they're likely to have. Use video links from your assessors that explain or demonstrate what's required. This can be really helpful when people are in isolation and they want to identify just what good evidence looks like. And finally, include all the additional forms that may be required, such as logbooks, third-party reports, and sample statutory declarations. How do we make RPL audit-friendly? The answer is very much in the mapping. Remember, RPL is an assessment-only pathway and should be treated the same way as any other assessment mapping. For example, what does competent performance really look like? Now, RPL shouldn't be easier or harder for the candidate than any other pathway. It still needs to be robust and have the same integrity as a training and assessment pathway, and doesn't require an overkill of evidence. Remember, we're not trying to punish the candidate for using RPL. Here's an example of an RPL tool mapping template. To the left, we start by looking at the elements and the performance criteria, and then we can compare them to the instruments we're going to use to collect the relevant evidence, such as competency conversation, practical activities, documents, and third-party evidence. Next, we want to make sure we are covering the entire unit of competency, so we might check out the foundation skills. Following this, we might look at the relevant performance evidence or knowledge evidence. This is how it might look filled out. On the left-hand side, we've got the list of performance evidence, and the first one here is plan and produce technically proficient digital images. We might use some sort of a practical activity, maybe a challenge test, let's say, as a way of supporting the claim for competence here. And we might combine that with some workplace documents. For the next one, the keyword is discuss. discuss the combination of ideas and techniques in own digital image work. So a competency conversation is going to be an appropriate way of collecting evidence this time. And the final one here is evaluate own work progress for improvement in creative processes and products. This time we might go back to those documents from the workplace and add some third-party evidence to complete the submission. Now, I wanted to take it one step further and remind us that regardless of whether it's a training and assessment pathway or an assessment-only pathway like RPL, we have to truly understand the standard that we're trying to measure. So in this case, I'm trying to match the bird, and I'm asking for someone to provide evidence to support their claim for competence, and they give me this. Now, clearly, those two things are very distant apart, and you probably shouldn't have them in the same place. So it's going to end badly for the bird in my view. Another candidate might produce this. As we put those two things side by side, we realize that they're identical, which means the evidence matches the standard. Now here's where it gets a bit tricky. What's the real standard here? Does it have to look identical to this, or am I just looking for a blue bird? So would this one be okay? So this is where we have to have a really good understanding of the unit of competency or the cluster of units we're using for the RPL submission. Does it even have to be a live bird? Would this be okay? Or would this be okay? An animated bird. It's still a blue bird. Does that meet the standard? So again, drilling down, helping our candidate to understand what the full standard is, and as an assessor, understanding what we're really looking for is going to be the holy grail of getting this right. So in the end, folks, it's all about relationships and choice, creating great relationships between you and the candidate and giving them choice of the indicative evidence that they could use to support their claim for competence. So where to from here? What are your next moves? Hopefully you can create some great RPL experiences that are both user-friendly and audit-friendly within your own organizations. So thanks for joining us on this latest webcast about creating user-friendly RPL. Hopefully we'll see you on another webcast sometime soon. If you want to check out some other things about Mr. Wed, here's our website, www.mrwed.edu.au. If you've got any other questions, my email's there, or you can tweet it out in 140 characters or less. We'll catch you next time.